Picture this. A little boy named Raymond is praying. Again, he's known to do this. You see, he's a faithful little child, the kind of child we're called to be like. He's got this special love and devotion for our Blessed Mother and asks her to let him know what's going to become of him. She appears to him in a vision. He later reports, "She came to me holding two crowns, one white, the other red. She asked me if I was willing to accept either of these crowns. The white one meant that I should persevere in purity, and the red that I should become a martyr. I said that I would accept them both." This kid is anxious to get his religious life started. There is no doubt in his mind that with Mary's guidance, he wants to devote his life to God. He doesn't wait long after his vision to run off with his older brother to join the conventual Franciscans. The problem is, the seminary, it's in Austria-Hungary, and Raymond lives in Poland, which at the time was part of the Russian Empire. Now, this is just a few years before World War I would break out, but Raymond is determined. He decides to sneak through the Russian partition and cross the border illegally. He makes it, and the young initiate Raymond is given the name Maximilian. That's right, St. Maximilian Kolbe was an illegal immigrant. Take from that what you will. Kolbe would achieve some impressive feats in his young adulthood. By the time he was in his mid-20s, he had a doctorate in philosophy, a doctorate in theology, had taken vows as a monk, and then had been ordained a priest. However, at the end of all of this, he would suffer his first bout of tuberculosis. His ill health would plague him for the rest of his life. But, as you'll see, he didn't use that as an excuse to slack off. He felt a strong motivation to fight for Mary against enemies of the church and to convert sinners. He founded the Militia Immaculata, or Army of the Immaculate One, with this goal in mind. He worked to promote Mary throughout Poland and created a newspaper called Night of the Immaculate. He also founded monasteries in both India and Japan. In 1930, in his devotion to the Immaculate One, he built a shrine in Nagasaki, Japan, to Our Lady of Lourdes. However, in 1936, he became ill again and went back home to Poland. 3 years later, Germany invaded Poland and World War II was triggered. So, did Kolbe react to this occupation by keeping his head down and making sure he went unnoticed? No. He reacted in the way you would expect a man like this to react. He built a temporary hospital to tend to the needs of others. But it didn't take long for the occupying forces to suspect the Catholic priest, and Kolbe was arrested and detained for 3 months before being released. So, did Kolbe learn his lesson from his imprisonment and keep his head down and try to avoid angering the enemy until the end of the war? No. Instead, he refused to sign a document that would acknowledge him as a German citizen. He continued doing his work in the monastery. He published newspapers that spoke out against their occupiers. He provided shelter for refugees, and he hid 1,500 to 2,000 Jews from the Germans. Well, the Germans found out he was helping Jews, and on February 17th, 1941, they had had enough. They closed the monastery down and arrested Kolbe. It wasn't long before he was transferred to Auschwitz. So, did Kolbe learn his lesson from his arrest and keep his head down in the death camp and follow the orders of his captors? No. Instead, he refused to abandon his duties as a priest and often gave up his portions of food to those who he felt needed it more. He was targeted, ridiculed, and tormented by the guards. One day, he was forced to carry the heaviest of loads of planks until he collapsed. He was then brutally beaten. His fellow prisoners actually had to hide him in order to allow him to recover. 6 months after his arrest, and around 3 months into his stay at Auschwitz, some men escaped the death camp. As a punishment, 10 prisoners were selected to be executed, among them a man named Gejavnezek. He cried out, "My wife! My children!" Kolbe heard this and asked that he be allowed to take his place. Their executioners agreed. Gejavnezek would survive the camp and would later be at Kolbe's canonization. Kolbe and the other 9 prisoners were then thrown into a cell without food or water for 2 weeks. It was reported that Kolbe spent this time ministering to the others. After the 2 weeks had expired, Kolbe and 2 others were still found alive. The prisoners were then injected with carbolic acid. Kolbe actually raised his arm to take his injection, putting on the red crown Mary had offered so many years before. Gejavnezek's statement about Kolbe's sacrifice, I think, says a lot. I could only thank him with my eyes. I was stunned and could hardly grasp what was going on, the immensity of it. I, the condemned, am to live, and someone else willingly and voluntarily offers his life for me, a stranger. Is this some dream? It brings to mind what Jesus said in the book of John. Greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. St. Maximilian Kolbe followed Christ by laying down his life, by choosing martyrdom over preserving his own life. He had dedicated his life to Christ and to spreading love for Mary, and then he died on the vigil of the Assumption of Mary. What Kolbe did was extraordinary. How often in our lives do we avoid helping others in much more mundane ways? We struggle to even rearrange our lives for others, much less risk or give up our lives. There are exceptions. There are many out there who risk their lives on a daily basis to make sure that we have our freedoms, that we are safe in our neighborhoods, or that we are cared for when disaster breaks out. Let's take a moment today to thank God for people who follow in the footsteps of St. Maximilian Kolbe, those who put others above themselves. In this video, we discuss a member of the Allied powers of World War II. In the next video, we'll go over a member of the Axis powers. I'll put that thumbnail here once it's released. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Until then, check out this playlist of others whose footsteps we should definitely follow. St. Maximilian Kolbe, pray for us.